All right. When you hear wilderness, what do you think of? Stepping into the wilderness.
Desolate.
What was that?
Desolate.
Desolate?
Yes.
Is that what I heard? Okay.
Yes.
All right. Anybody else? What do you think of when you think of the wilderness?
Lonely.
Lonely. Okay.
Forest and
Hard.
woods. I see forest and woods.
Forest and woods.
Uh-huh.
You said? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
When I think of the wilderness, I think of just there's no water. I mean, I look at some areas of Reno, it's just like there's nothing but sagebrush and dirt and rocks. That to me is desolate.
When I think of wilderness, I also think of a place of utter vulnerability.
Ooh.
And having to rely on resources that are beyond your beyond your control.
I like that, Brenda. I like that. Okay. You know, the Bible is chock full of talk about the wilderness.
Yeah.
So I want us to take a look at, I want us to kind of walk through the different wilderness scriptures tonight and see what the biblical application of the wilderness is. Because for us, when we think about God, I'm in the wilderness right now. Is it a positive? Is it a negative? What kind of connotation is it when we think, I'm going through something, I'm in the wilderness?
It's usually negative.
It's usually negative, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
Somewhere along the way, Satan has flipped the script on us, which is what he likes to do, because we find that scripturally, it's a positive thing, but somehow it's become a negative thing. When we think about being in the wilderness, we're either in a bad situation or God is mad at me and he's deserted me. It's always something pretty heavy and deep. And I really want us to get a whole different perspective. I want us to reframe what we look at when we think about the wilderness. Okay. So right now, tonight, we're just going to read a lot of different wilderness scriptures by Exodus 15:22.
Then Moses led Israel from the Red Sea, and they went into the desert of Shur. For 3 days they traveled in the desert without finding water.
Wow.
Do you want me to keep going?
Yes, I'm sorry, through 24.
When they came to Mara, they could not drink its water because it was bitter. That is why the place is called Mara. So the people grumbled against Moses, saying, "What are we to drink?"
All right, so we're beginning to look at what the wilderness or the desert, those two words, we'll see them, they're going to go together. They bring about a connotation, but I want us to see what happened right before that. So Maureen, if you can take it back to Exodus 14, to read just 29 through 31.
But the Israelites went through the sea on dry ground, with the wall of water on their right and on their left. That day the Lord saved Israel from the hands of the Egyptians, and Israel saw the Egyptians lying dead on the shore. And when the Israelites saw the mighty hand of the Lord displayed against the Egyptians, the people feared the Lord and put their trust in him and in Moses, his servant.
All right, we're all familiar with this. We've all seen the movie, right? Put yourself in their position. We are just walking through the Red Sea and we watched this wall of water. We saw all this take place and we're walking through free. What do you think they're feeling?
I'd still be in awe. I would be in awe. It would be in awe, just the fact that they did that, that it happened.
Right?
That your mind would still be reeling from that. Has to still be reeling from the fact that you just walked through a big old thing of water and never got wet.
Right? So they're pretty fired up about this. Yes, Maureen?
Yeah, I would.
say?
That would hope so.
Yeah.
Amazing, just amazing.
This is amazing, Linda.
I'd be like, check us out. Look at this. Look what he's doing. Woohoo.
Go ahead. Who was that? Bella?
Yeah, sorry. I was gonna say I would probably be a little bit like anxious and fearful because like you see the Egyptians lying dead on the shore
Yeah.
and it's like, oh, well, this is not something I should play around with, like at the same time, because while it's beautiful and something to be in awe of, it's also like I'm a swim instructor. Water is like serious danger.
Right?
So for it to just be on the sides of you and not know if it's gonna cave back in on you would be like, oh, okay.
That is true. Listen to that though. They're walking through this, they're seeing this, and whether they are amazed and they're in awe, they're fearful, whatever, they make it across to the other side and the water goes down. So now they know they're safe. They're like, woo, we are Jesus. We with the, they're on the right side of town, right? You know what? So they're cheering, they're excited. It's a party going on because they know that they're on the winning team. So you look at it and go, okay, so their feelings, their response towards God is what at this moment?
Happy,
Happy, yeah.
in
Right.
love,
Yeah,
blessed.
Deep gratitude.
right. But then in a split second, we go to the next scripture that Maureen read, that then Moses, after he leads them through the Red Sea, and they have this party moment. And then it says, then Moses led Israel from the Red Sea, and they went into the desert. How they feeling now?
They forgot everything. That was yesterday. That was yesterday.
Yeah, that,
You know,
that was
maybe-
yesterday, not today.
Maybe it wasn't, maybe I was imagining it. No, there's some scientific reason. There's got to be a scientific reason. There's an explanation for what happened yesterday.
It looks like it's 3 days after. That's why the Bible it says 3 days. They traveled for 3 days.
Yes.
So traveling in the desert for 3 days can mess you up.
They definitely
When you're
forgot
not
what happened
safe.
in the 3 days before that.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Brenda hit upon something. When we get discomforted, it messes us up. They went from being amazed, woo-hoo, we're with God and you are not, and all happy. And then 3 days of discomfort start to mess them up, right?
Yep.
How long does it take before you go from being happy, woo-hoo, God, you're the bomb, to, oh, so I don't know about all this, God.
Seconds.
Yesterday.
Seconds.
Yesterday. I don't remember yesterday.
There is a reason. Think about it. Why would God take them from such elation to the desert? Why would he take them?
Test their faith. I think he just wanted to test their faith because they were faithful when things were going good. Are they going to be faithful when things start to get a little bit uncomfortable?
Okay. Okay. Good. Any others?
Trust. Do you trust? He's trying to see if they trust him.
Right.
Plus, they were in their infancy as well. And you got, I truly believe he is teaching them and building trust and a relationship with them.
Okay. Good.
That's what I was thinking too. It's like he's giving them opportunities to see how much more he'll provide for them. And thereby perhaps they're able to build their trust in him as a source of whatever, everything.
Linda, and then we'll go down to G.
I think honestly, and my perspective, because this is my experience, that God wanted to show them their hearts because they liked it when things were one way. God's like, okay, here's where you are when things aren't what you want. You go from great things to I don't trust you anymore.
Okay, good. G.
I was just gonna say that he's also like trying to get them to see or reveal himself that he's the same God. It doesn't matter, depending on your circumstance. Like he doesn't change on circumstances, and when their circumstance change, they view him differently. But I think he wants them to see that he's the same through every circumstance, regardless if it's good to us or a trying time to us. That he's still the same person in each season.
Very good.
Good.
How long were they out in the desert?
Entirely, you mean?
Yeah.
In total? About
Mhm.
40 years.
was, I think, wasn't it 70 years?
It's a long time, right? For
Yeah,
God to be
that's a
trying to
long
make a
time.
point. Why do you think he left them out there for so long?
Well, he got mad at them at one point and said, "You're going to walk for 40 years."
Oh, he said that he wanted to teach them a lesson, and purify and refine them.
Okay. Margie, thank you, Brenda.
He was very angry because they did that golden calf thing in the whole 9 yards, and he was like, "What are you doing? I just did all these miracles, and you build a stupid calf, a dumb animal to worship rather than still stay faithful to me." He was like, "What are you thinking? What were you thinking? I'm giving you time. 40 years is enough time for you to finally figure out that the golden calf is not going to save your butts. You need to get real and understand it's me. I'm God and I'm here. You guys just are not looking."
All right. So let's say 40 years. That's a lot. That's 4 generations, if we think in terms of how many passed through that. So the ending generation wasn't the same generation who built the golden calf, you know? So what was God's point in leaving them out there so long? Would he punish the younger generation for the sin of the older generation?
Nope, because he had already promised he would never do that. Wait. Yeah, he didn't, because he only punished those who had disobeyed and said, when Joshua and the spies went, he only punished the older people to take them out so that the younger people would learn a new way of relying on him.
It was the original generation that he, yes.
Okay. I asked that question. Anybody? Okay, Bella.
Well, it's funny to me because kind of like they went to Mara, and in Mara, like Naomi in like Ruth 120, she's like, "Don't call me Naomi, call me Mara, because the Lord has dealt bitterly with me." And it's like the water in Mara is bitter. But then when you jump to like verse 25 in Exodus 15, it says that Moses threw in the wood and the water became fit to drink.
Right.
So it's like, even though they're exalted from this place of like all of their sin, all of their bitterness, all of their waiting and kind of just wanting, God's led them out of it, but they're still in the same mindset of, you are still bitter. And because you are bitter, it's like infecting the next generation to come. Like, you guys all are still bitter. And as a nation, I'm dealing with you. So as a nation, you are bitter. And that is why you guys are still here. You're still stuck in this place where there can't, like, you're in the desert. Nothing grows in the desert because you guys are putting yourself here.
Oh, good. Good. I want us to hit up on this. The reason I asked this question is because we usually think, and it's fair enough, that they're in the desert because God's angry at them and they need to learn some lessons. Because that's how we see our own lives. God, I'm in this desert because I need to learn some lessons. But it would be an unfair God if that was the only reason.
Right.
Because they were there for 4 generations. And as we just pointed out, the younger generation had nothing to do with this sin of the older ones. So if God is punishing one for the sin of the other, then he just contradicted himself. So there has to be a deeper reason. Yes, indeed, he wants to go through all that, but there has to be a deeper reason, which I think Bella hit up on something. Linda, I saw your hand, and we're going to go back to what Bella was just sharing. Linda.
Oh, so maybe you go back to what Bella was sharing, then I can talk after that, because I don't want to lose that flow that she had going on if you want.
Okay. I want us to talk about just the bitterness, the water, the bitterness. What had the Israelites come out of before passing through the Red Sea? What had they come out of? Maureen.
Slavery.
What does slavery do? Now, not that we've all been there, but we all understand it. What does slavery do to a person?
Oh, it's horrific.
Makes us bitter. It just embitters the soul and the heart.
Breaks you. It breaks you.
It breaks you. I love that. Reggie?
It devalues you. It just devalues, it lowers your value even among yourselves. everybody gets lowered. So you're less than everybody else because you're a slave. So it
Okay.
devalues you, and in your mind and in other people's eyes, you're devalued because you're a slave.
Good, very good. Linda.
Oh,
A comment on even that. I think even you get used to being a slave because it's what you know, it's what you're comfortable with. You don't know anything outside of that.
Maureen, what were you sharing?
yeah, just right on back on Linda's back. You have no hope. You can never change your position. You can never change your class. You will always be a slave. There's no hope. And that mentally, when you have no hope, that is a huge mental issue.
Yes. It wasn't just sin. It was a systematic belief system that had to be changed. They had been enslaved for quite a long time. You know, if we think about it, even once Moses had let them out and they started to get the manna, at one point they wanted to return to it. Why would you want to return? Maureen?
Because you go back to where you're comfortable, one. That's
Mhm.
why most women go back to abusers, because believe it or not, even though they feel comfort, it's what they know.
Yeah.
The second reason is you always remember things better than what they were.
Yes.
That's true.
Yes.
Always do. Yep.
How long, it's going to be a strange question. How long does it take? And Tabney, I'm going to ask you to talk on this. And I just have a feeling you would know something. How long does it take a person, not just to come out of slavery, but to get slavery out of that person?
Oh, it really is a feeling. I think it is removing yourself from the flesh, and that divine nudge, at least in my experience, is that nudge of recognizing, okay, God does not play about me, you know? So when am I going to get in that mindset of, you know, providing myself with my greatest worth? So I don't know time frame. I just think it's more of when you become fed up, you know? But I believe that he makes it so uncomfortable that you can't stay. So that to me is that divine nudge that's like, my child, you don't deserve this. You are better than this. This is not the path I've laid. This is not your purpose. So are you ready now to rise? Because everything around you, I've closed every door, I've closed every opportunity, and you hear me and you go.
Yeah. You think about, and those of us of color on this thing, you think about how many people are still enslaved,
Oh yeah.
even
Oh, yeah.
though we have not been, quote unquote, in slavery for a long, long time, but so many people are still enslaved. It takes a whole lot longer to pull slavery out of the person
Yes.
than to pull the person out of slavery. So again, I ask the question, why did God lead them into the desert for such a long period of time? Linda's like,
Okay, so I'm sure you guys seen the show, you know, the survival shows, but the one guy, Bear Grylls, he goes out there into the middle of nowhere where he's got nothing. He's got his knife and maybe he's got some matches and stuff like that. That's kind of how I see it spiritually. You go out there and you've got nothing but God, but you learn spiritually how to live. You start seeing yourself. The wilderness is a place where your vulnerabilities, in a good way, good vulnerabilities, our weaknesses, our strengths, that's where we get to see who we really are because of how we respond to the challenges that come to us. And the wilderness is that place. Actually, that's the place where we grow more than any place else. I can say that. For me, wilderness, bam, best place of growth I've ever been. In Israel needed that time so they could see who they were, so they could see who God was and what God can do. It was just synopsis, brief.
okay, awesome. Brenda, were you going to share something different?
Like that, but God wanted to take Egypt out of them because whenever they doubted God, they always wanted to go back to Egypt. So he had to put them in a space where the provisions were scarce so that they could really, truly rely on him.
Yes.
Was it a punishment?
No, it was a lesson,
Says-
but lessons are good. Like sometimes we think lessons are bad, but it was a lesson of like he was gifting them this ability to grow as he's teaching them a lesson of like, you can always rely on me.
Ooh, I like that, gifting them. Maureen.
I think the punishment was not allowing them to see the land of milk and honey. I think that was their punishment. But the rest was to help their children grow as well as them. Remember, they're the ones who saw all the miracles, not necessarily the children. So they would have to teach their children about God and who he was and all the great miracles. And the Passover, they had to keep all that in remembrance for more than 40 years. So they were there to teach their children as well as God teaching them. But their punishment was not going into the land of milk and honey.
Okay, good. G, you're going to share something, and then Bella.
I was just gonna add that like we are gonna depend on something, whether it's ourselves, whether it's a relationship, whether it's a job, whether it's God, whatever it is, and whether it's their comfortability in Egypt. It's as if God was trying to say, like, who or where are you going to depend on? And at any circumstance, back to my whole circumstance thing, happenstance. But to me, it's just like in the desert is when I find what or who am I depending on right now? And if it's not God, then the desert is a lot worse than it can be with God. Because it's not like they were all just going to die in the desert. God was going to provide for them there. But if they didn't depend on him, they probably would have struggled a lot more.
Yes, good. Thank you. Bella.
Yeah, so they traveled like in the desert for 3 days and then they found this water that's bitter. And it's like after 3 days of not having water, generally people are like, oh, you can't survive that long without water. You can't do it with dehydration. And then you come to this water, but it's bitter. And then it's like God changed the water. He changed it so it's not bitter so you can drink it. But it's like it still took you 3 days to find that water and then still have it be changed by God. And it's like, okay, so you're sitting in this whole place of, oh, like I am stuck because I don't have water, it's bitter. But then it's like they kind of forgot who to rely on and who actually took them out, even though that took so much time, who actually brought them to water, and then who ultimately can change them because they're still not going to God. And I think that's the whole lesson here. He's like, I've done all of these things. I've given you water to drink. I've given you a place to build up, but you are still not like building your heart up with me. And because of that, you're not ever going to build up higher or build out anywhere.
Good. These were the children of God. Remember that. But yet, who had become their God? Who had become their king? Before they left Egypt,
Pharaoh was their king. Pharaoh was their God.
king. Pharaoh was their God. Everything they knew was Egyptian.
Right.
So God had to transform. He had to pull out as well as put in order to reclaim his children. How does that apply to us today? Or does it?
Oh, it definitely does.
Maureen.
That have pulled out our worldly mind, the mind that thinks worldly, and put in his thoughts and his desires for us.
Yeah. We all have our own kings, and it may not be the Lord of Lords, King of Kings, even though that we say it is. So we have to really stop, examine ourselves and go, you know what? I've been living in Egypt for a long time. We've been living in the world for a long time. And if we're honest, the world has taken hold of us. And sometimes God has to lead us into a wilderness in order to get the world out and to reacquaint us with who our God is. He had to reacquaint them. They had forgotten, because they had been in captivity for so long, who they belonged to.
Right.
So his taking them into the desert, and he did it right away. Why do you think he did not take them directly through the Red Sea into the promised land? Woohoo!
I don't think Egypt would live. I don't think they would have learned to really rely on him, because he would have taken them from, yes, maybe some like total pain, but they still were provided for under this God, Pharaoh. But if he took them to a place where they were still provided for, then they wouldn't truly understand the essence of how to rely on a God who provides for you, whether you have nothing, when everything is going crazy or not.
Okay, good. Linda?
And they never had a relationship with God when things were good. So it's like, how to explain this? So they saw God only within this small capacity when they were slaves in Egypt. Taken to the promised land, they would still have too much of that mindset. I think that the desert, the wilderness was it was the time to really get to know who God is and who they were. That's the purpose, I think.
Great. Maureen, then over to G.
So my thought process is that they forgot, I think they would have forgot they forgot at the bottom of the mountain after he put them. They didn't have any bad thing after that, and they built a calf, or an idol. I think if you had taken them straight to the promised land, they would have forgotten. It happened yesterday, and we're just going to go on and do what we want to do.
Okay, G. Thanks,
I
Maureen.
just think it's so crazy how, not just for them, but for us, God could do something incredible and have this huge thing happen. But it takes us so long to be reliant on him, to remember that he was the one who provided this way. Like, I can think of incredible things that have happened in people's lives. Let's say life changing or life saving. And, maybe they say that's because of God one moment, and then 6 months later, God's forgotten about and never really come back around to. And I'm like, something as big as walking through a sea, you can forget that. That's crazy to me. So it's like a little ping to me. Like, we've talked about this a lot, BJ, in your lessons, not forgetting each of those moments that God has really done something transformative or healing or whatever it is. And I think that's when I've seen like the biggest change in my life, is when I have remembered the change he brought about before.
Right.
I'm just like, is that not so crazy? It must be a warning to us. Like, don't forget these things, even though they seem like you could never forget them, like being cured of cancer or dodging a bullet. People forget those things. It's crazy.
Yeah.
I forget those things.
Very true. Bella.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, like, God obviously has a time plan for everything. And it's like they clearly were not ready to go to the promised land because God wouldn't have kept them from it. It's like if they had gone, I feel like they would have ruined it, because they weren't, like, in themselves, they weren't acting like they were promised anything. They're like, okay, well, now we're in the wilderness. Now we're like unsure of what's going on. But it's like God has said over and over again, I'm giving you the promised land. I will deliver you out of Egypt. You will not be a slave anymore. But it's like, until you're ready to really receive something, like, I wouldn't give my 5-year-old like the keys to a car, even though they're going to drive it when they're 16. Like, sure, get in the car. Like, that's not a good idea. Everyone knows what that situation would look like. And that's what I picture in my mind. They weren't ready for it.
Very good.
Excellent.
Very good. All right. Yeah. Think about what God is doing here. And I just stress it because we're so quick to go to God is punishing me. I'm bad. I did something wrong. It's like we put ourselves in the corner, in the doghouse, when God's going, no, I'm taking something out of you that has to come out. And I'm putting something in that needs to be in. Otherwise, if they had gone directly from the Red Sea, crossing the Red Sea into the promised land, it simply would have become Egypt 2.0.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's all it would have become, because that's all they knew. That's why when Moses went up to the mountain and he came back down, they had made an idol of an Egyptian god, because Egypt was still very much still inside of them.
Yep.
But I want us to take a quick look. We're just going to kind of walk through some of the wilderness passages, because God is showing me something even beyond that. He is definitely pulling stuff out, but he's also doing something else. When he meets Moses up with the burning bush, what is that all about? We won't read that one, but what is that one all about?
You mean like the reason behind the burning bush?
Yeah.
I think that it was to get Moses' attention.
Yeah.
Number one, fire in the wilderness. That's what's going on right where I'm at.
Right.
When you see fire, you start packing up the stuff that is most important to you. You start evaluating, what do I need to get out? How close is the fire? I believe when he saw that, it drew his attention. He wanted Moses' attention right away.
Yes. Yes. Brenda.
There's also, okay, this just occurred to me, but it showed also that God is not limited to space. Like he just doesn't appear to you in a church setting or something. He's like, I can appear to you anywhere. So my presence is, I'm omnipresent. So, yeah.
Yes. I want us to see, and go ahead, G.
I was just going to say, it was also, the story was very dependent upon Moses's response to the fire.
Mhm.
And you can react to fire with fear or with an inquisitive mind. And because he was inquisitive, he was able to draw near to the flame, which was ultimately God. But when we come across things that we don't understand, we're going to react to it in two different ways.
Ooh, love that. This was Moses's desert moment. He's in the desert. He's in the wilderness. God leads him. He gets his attention through the burning bush. God often leads us into the wilderness to get our attention.
Yes.
So when we are going through something, that's our wilderness. God, you're trying to get my attention. And then as G said, how are you going to respond to it is what's going to make a difference. What are different ways we respond to our wilderness? God's trying to get our attention, but we have different ways that we can respond.
This is a personal question.
It can be. Margie.
You can respond with fear, insecurity, because you're not sure why you're there, you're not sure what the reason is, or you're trying to figure it all out because it's there, you're in the midst of it, but you don't know what you did to get there, because usually we don't remember what we did to get there. So God's trying to get our attention, but we're there in it, not knowing how to respond just yet until we figure out what it is it's all about. Then we can figure out what kind of response we need. How do we respond to what God's trying to do there?
Okay. Linda, thank you, Margie.
This might sound weird to some people, but this actually is what I have learned, because it's the best way to get through it is just respond with gratitude and say, okay, God, this is not fun, but I know that you have something for me in this. So I know I don't want to say bring it on, but okay, let's do this.
Okay.
I like that. Just to piggyback, bring it on does work because you're protected. You're divinely protected. So you've got his armor. My addition was I get quiet and patient because I recognize he's trying to tell me something. I try to panic less and just pause more, right? And just be like, okay, all right, 17 things have gone wrong, or 3 mishaps, or 2 sets of bad news. Let me just come back and get centered.
Right. Right. It takes us back to God is trying to get our attention, but then also, as G said, how do we respond to it? Because a lot of times, I think what Margie shared, sometimes we're busy trying to figure out why I'm here. and what I did and what you're trying to tell me. And even that can get in the way. We're so busy trying to do God's job for him, figure out stuff, that we're not quietly listening. As opposed to, oh, okay, God, you brought me here, bring it on. I do like that, because it is a matter of, God, you brought me here and only you really know the reason. So I'm going to sit here and let you tell me. Moses had to be at that place of, God, yes, I see this is going on around me. I have no clue. I can't make sense of it. So I'm not even going to try. You tell me, why am I here? Linda, looks like you're about to say something.
Yeah, I think the thing is too, this is life experience, is are we really paying attention and to acknowledge that something is going on so that we can bring God in on conversation and wrestle and either say, okay, I'm scared, I hate this, or God, bring it on. We've got to have that awareness that we are actually, there's something that God is trying to do.
Okay. Flip over to 1 Kings. I was just going to reference it, but we'll read it. 1 Kings 19.
What verse?
1 Kings 19, 9 through 21. Who can read that for me?
Oh, 9 through 21?
Yes, please.
I turned right to it, 19, 9 through 21.
And I guess that means you're reading.
Okay, this is New Living Translation. There he came to a cave, Elijah, where he spent the night. But the Lord said to him, "What are you doing here, Elijah?" Elijah replied, "I have zealously served the Lord God Almighty, but the people of Israel have broken their covenant with you, torn down your altars, and killed every one of your prophets. I'm the only one left, and now they are trying to kill me too. Go out and stand before me on the mountain," the Lord told him. And as Elijah stood there, the Lord passed by and a mighty windstorm hit the mountain. It was such a terrible blast, the rocks were torn loose, but the Lord was not in the wind. After the wind, there was an earthquake, but the Lord was not in the earthquake. And after the earthquake, there was a fire, but the Lord was not in the fire. And after the fire, there was the sound of a gentle whisper. When Elijah heard it, he wrapped his face in his cloak and went out and stood at the entrance of the cave. And a voice said, "What are you doing here, Elijah?" He replied again, "I have zealously served the Lord God Almighty, but the people of Israel have broken their covenant with you, torn down your altars, and killed every one of your prophets. I'm the only one left, and now they're trying to kill me too." Then the Lord told him, "Go back the same way you came and travel to the wilderness of Damascus. When you arrive there, anoint Hazael to be the king of Aram. Then anoint Jehu, grandson of Nimshi, to be the king of Israel. And anoint Elisha, son of Japhat, from the town of Abel Meholah, to replace you as my prophet. Anyone who escapes Hazael will be killed by Jehu. Then those who escape Jehu will be killed by Elisha. Yet I will preserve 7,000 others in Israel who have never bowed down to Baal or kissed him." So Elijah went and found Elisha, son of Japhat, plowing a field. I'll keep going. There were 12 teams of oxen in the field, and Elisha was plowing with the 12th team. Elisha went over to him, threw his cloak across his shoulders, and then walked away.
Okay, that's good. What do you see? This is Elijah in the wilderness. God led him there on purpose. What was his reason?
Wow.
Wanted to see how he was going to respond to all the other things that were going on, because he got him out there, but then he had the rocks, the fire, all this other stuff going on. After you asked him, what was he doing out there in the first place? And he's like, "Well, they're trying to kill me, so I'm out here trying to save my own life. What am I supposed to be doing, Lord? What do you think? They killed everybody else. I'm the only one left. Do I survive or do I keep going? What do you want me to do?"
Okay, thank you. Bella.
It's so funny with the mention of the cave, because in my psychology class, that's actually what I studied today, that sleeping in a cave was super common because caves are protective natural structures that you go into. The wind's not going to go in there. Like, animals generally don't go in there. So it's like Elijah is going in there and saying, "Oh, I can protect myself. Like, I know what I'm doing. And if I just go here, then I'll be safe from the people that are after me and whatever elements are going to come up and like surprise me too. But God's like, why are you hiding? Like, do you not trust that I can protect you? Do you not trust that I have a plan for you and I'm going to use you? And that doesn't involve you being fearful right now, because I need you to go back and tell these people who is going to help rule over them right now. So that was just super, super interesting to me.
Awesome. Very good. G, and then Maureen.
Yeah, it's so interesting that he was on his way to hide, but he also knew God's voice. Like he was in a weird spot where he was close enough to God to understand, like, oh, he wasn't in the earthquake, he wasn't in the fire, he wasn't in all of this. But when he heard the whisper, it says he pulled his cloak over his face. And that's so interesting compared to like what happened in the garden when they were naked and realized it and clothed themselves. Like they were ashamed. So in my mind, I'm thinking he's like, oh, okay, God found me. I was running and obviously I wasn't trusting. So now I'm going to like kind of cover up in some way, because if I see his glory around me, like it's too much for me. And so I just thought it was so interesting that even with the Lord passing by through a whisper, he felt the need to kind of cover up, but still knew, because we know this, the scriptures about my sheep know my voice. It was as if he knew his voice, but he also knew he probably was not where he should have been. He was trusting God.
Good stuff. All right, Maureen.
So I was thinking that he, we say, oh, he was afraid, but I think he was more than afraid. I think he was terrified. He had just made, well, he was already an enemy of Jezebel, but he had just became number one enemy, most wanted man, because he had destroyed all the prophets of Baal. And Jezebel sent him a message saying, I'm coming for you. I am coming for you. I'm going to kill you. And he was terrified. He was so terrified. And I think he was more terrified of Jezebel and her husband than he was in fear of God or the presence of God or the power of God. He was more afraid. So I think what God was showing him was, look what I can do. This is who I am. I'm God. I'm the most powerful. And then like I do, he starts negotiating with God. Let's make this a negotiation. Let's see if we can negotiate our way out of this. But God, I'm the only one left. You have no one else. It's just me. We got to save just me.
Yes. I want us to look at, again, what are the reasons why God leads us into the wilderness? Because he does. And we don't get to pick how long we're going to be there or what that reason is. He took Moses up to that mountain with the burning bush to get his attention, so that he could have a conversation with Moses away from the people, away from all those noises and voices. He allowed Elijah to go run into that cave so that he could have conversation with Elijah. What was he fixing? Elijah was terrified. Like Maureen said, when we get afraid or terrified or whatever descriptive we want to place on it, we lose perspective.
Yes.
Elijah is saying, they've killed everybody, now they're trying to kill me too, and I'm the only one left. And he wasn't the only one left, but he had lost perspective. So God led him into his wilderness, yes, to quiet him, to get his attention, but to also press that reset button, because you've lost sight of where we were going. You were running a good race and Jezebel cut in on you and you lost sight of where we were going. I don't know about you guys. I've been that before. Where I was going full steam. I'm like, okay, God, me and you. And then all of a sudden something cuts in and you're like, uh-oh, butterfly, completely lose track.
Yeah.
And God has to pull me back in and go, okay, BJ, refocus.
Yeah.
Who's in control? Who's got this? And look at what he does. He sent him back the way he came. Why do you think that that's important? It's an interesting little something that God threw in there. He sent him back the way he came. Brenda.
Because sometimes there's some bridges we maybe have burned that actually need to be rectified or rebuilt, that would actually lead us to something that God is like, your destiny is over that way, and I want you to reroute so that you can regroup as you get back, so that you can really see what I'm about to do in your life or what I've set aside for you.
Good. Love that. Linda?
I want, even Brenda is saying, there are lessons God needs us to learn. He puts us in the midst of something and we just kind of bypass it. And God is going to end up taking us right back. And every time we end up right back, because it's a lesson we need to learn.
Yeah. He's like, I don't want you to just skip over it. I don't want you to run away. Sometimes we can run away and we go, okay, God, I'm back with you now, but we really haven't dealt with what we ran away from. And God's like, no, we're gonna go back.
Yeah, you're gonna go back.
We're gonna go back. And then he goes on and says, but he said, now I'm gonna give you some help. You're gonna have this, you're gonna have this, you're gonna have this. So he sends him back, but he shows him the correct way to go through it. So God often will lead us into the wilderness to redirect us.
Mhm.
Again, was he mad at him? No.
No.
God isn't mad and angry at us, but we're so quick to attribute that to him. He said, no, I'm trying to prepare you. I'm equipping you for something. You're running away. I'm sending you back. You're caught up in trying to lead all these crazy people. And I'm saying, you got to be quiet now, Moses, and be quiet so you can listen to me. God is saying, when I put you in the wilderness, it's for a reason. And I love the fact that with both of them, it was God's opportunity to speak to them face to face. When we go into a wilderness, when God sends us into a wilderness, it is our opportunity to be face to face with God. If we look at it that way, it changes how we view going into the wilderness. Again, our idea of wilderness today is very negative. Oh, it's bad. Oh, it's hard. Oh, it's this. Oh, it's that. And it's a bad situation or a difficult situation. But if we can see it as, this is where I go to be with God, then it changes things.
It's an opportunity.
Right. It's opportunity instead of opposition. Every time something becomes discomforting or uncomfortable, rather, we see it as opposition. And God is not using it as opposition. He said, this is an opportunity for you to draw near to me, for me to redirect you, for me to point you back if we need to go back and do something the right way. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Ladies? All right. How many other desert situations can you think of in scripture? Wilderness. John the Baptist, where did he come from?
The wilderness.
From the wilderness.
He was out in
Jesus
the wilderness.
also went to the wilderness to be tempted.
Jesus went out to the wilderness to be tempted. There's so Isaiah. There's so many. So we have to look at that and go, God, either you're being just crazy and repetitive, or there's something in this. I believe there's something in it. I think God wants us.
Hagar went to the wilderness, remember? And then that's when she saw God and she said, God sees me.
The wilderness is where we go to see God. If we can see it that way, we start embracing those difficult moments that we go through in life instead of trying to push them away. If we think in terms of every time I push away something that's difficult, I'm pushing away the voice of God. I'm pushing away a lesson of God. Instead, God, bring it on, as Lyndon Tabney was saying. Bring it on. I don't know what it's going to be. I don't know how long it's going to be, but I know that there's a lesson in it for me. So bring it on. The wilderness, we've got to get to a point where we embrace it instead of pushing against it. Because in all of the different wilderness situations, and do please study it out, God is having a personal conversation with each one of them. So when we avert the wilderness, we are turning our opportunity to have a personal relationship or conversation with God, we're pushing it away. And that's what we want. We want that relationship. I'm going to go full circle to close it out because I know it's kind of going long here. We have the Israelites and they crossed through the Red Sea, but they had to go for 40 plus years before they actually stepped foot into the promised land. Were they the same people? Brenda, I see you nodding. What does that mean? You wanna
Sorry,
comment?
they weren't the same people. They certainly came out refined.
They came out refined, but even beyond that, the
Yeah.
people that Moses led into the desert, they
They
died.
were then. Yeah, they were
They
all gone.
died before we went into the promised land. So God had them there for this long period of time for many different reasons. But those that came out of Egypt, he was taking Egypt out of them.
Right.
Remember, bringing them back to an understanding of they were children of God. So he was bringing all that out so that they could, and I don't know who said, I think it was Bella early on, they now had to pass that on to their children
Yes.
because the children didn't see all that.
Oh, they didn't have all that. Yeah.
They didn't have that reference. They didn't understand. I mean, you know, mom and dad saw it, but they didn't. So they had to pass that on in order for them to go freely, clean, clear into the promised land. So we look at how long it took, but it took so long because God was cleaning out not just one generation, but 4 generations in order to bring about a clear, pure people that he put into the promised land.
Yeah.
So as we are going through our wilderness, whatever that wilderness may be, whatever challenges God's putting us through, God's cleaning us out, and we may not see the final end result. It may be for the sake of our children or our grandchildren or their children, because God is bringing back to him a people that is blemish free. He loved them throughout the whole thing. He cared for them. He provided for them. He took care of them, but he was bringing about a people that was blemish free into the promised land. So for us, as we look at whatever it is God is putting us through, we have to get to a point where we go, God, first of all, this is my time to be face to face with you. But also, if I don't receive the promise, I know it's for a reason. And my next generation or the generation after that is going to benefit. And because of that, I'm willing to learn whatever lessons I'm willing to learn. Does that make sense?
Huh?
Give me some feedback. We're done for tonight. Where's your thoughts?
No, I just learned to appreciate the wilderness because that's when God is trying to talk to you. That's when when you feel like you're most alone, because you really are in that wilderness, that's the time that God's the closest, because he really is trying to get your attention. I think about Moses and how he got his attention, how he kept his attention, how he kept doing things to have him be tested and everything else to make sure he had his attention each and every time. So whatever he was thinking, whatever he was doing, he had to stop and go get focused on what is it God's trying to say to me, and then receive the message. So that's a great way to look at it. The wilderness is not something bad. It really is something good.
Amen. Awesome. Linda.
Oh, I'm sorry, I wasn't raising my hand. I was
Oh,
just-
okay.
I
Maureen,
do.
Maureen, then Bella.
So one of the things I liked was opportunity instead of opposition. I think that inherently we tend to look at the wilderness negatively,
Mhm.
so as opposition. And I think it's just something that we do. And because it's not our way, anything that's not our way, we tend to see as opposition to our path because it's our mindset. And that God's way is the opportunity, and ours, actually, our own mind is opposition to God.
Yes, very true. Thank you. Bella.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, kind of the interaction between Elisha and Elijah is kind of what I feel like God wants our response to him to be when he's calling us out into the wilderness. Because Elisha's like, oh, I need to go like kiss my mother and father goodbye. And he's like, okay, go do it, but don't stay there. And then he goes and he just burns everything. He lets go of everything to just go and learn and become a servant and like just figure it out from there and just trust in the process.
Mhm.
And I'm like, he didn't know that he was going with Elijah to just like wherever, right? He didn't know that. He was told, go let go of everything that's holding you here and let's move on. It's time to go.
Yeah.
And that's so encouraging because it's like when it's time to go, when you've been holding on from something for so long, kind of that release, because it says that he was driving the 12th pair of the yoke.
Mhm.
And I'm like, he's carrying this burden on him already. But it's like Elijah's here telling you it's time to let it go. Go burn that stuff is what he did. And he killed all the stuff and he's just, up and going. So
Awesome. Thank you. Linda, was that a hand? I did.
Yeah, it was, it's been my advanced years. I think, I mean, the desert, I mean, the wilderness, actually, when you think about it, and I would, after all these years, I would dare anybody to say this is not true. I mean, it's the hardest thing is the wilderness is the place where you get the most growth.
Mhm.
You learn more about God. You learn more about yourself. And we have those great times when we're not struggling, but the wilderness is where things really happen. That's where we are honed
Yeah.
and sharpened and made beautiful for God. And that's where God prepares us for the things he has us to do. It's the wilderness. It's not the promised land.
Yeah, very good. All right, ladies. Well, we'll leave it with that. We so desire the promised lands. Like we all want to get to the finish line so quickly. You get ready to start a race, and the first thing you start thinking about, okay, how am I going to celebrate when I cross the finish line? Why don't we just run the race first? Although when we're in hardship, we want to avoid the discomfort as much as possible, but it's actually an invitation for us to encounter God. So tonight, I'm asking us to flip the script and reframe how we look at hardship. We're all going to go through it.
Yeah.
But if we see it as this is an opportunity for God to transform what's going on inside of me, then we go through it with grace as opposed to kicking and screaming. And, and lastly, the thing that I learned is it's not always about us. Whatever it is that you're going through, you may not end up reaping the harvest. Moses didn't cross over into the promised land. It wasn't about him.
No.
He went through the whole process that the rest of the people had to go through, and Joshua was able to do so. So to look at that and go, you know what, God, just because I want it doesn't mean it's going to happen. Let me carry my part. If we're running a race, a relay, I'm carrying the baton. If my part is simply that first leg and I pass that baton, then I need to pass the baton. I can't just keep running and go, no, I'm not going to pass it to G because I want to be the one to cross the finish line. God has us in order the way that he sees fit for us to go across that finish line. We all have our part. Moses's part was different from Joshua's. Those who came out of Egypt, their part was different from those who were born in the wilderness, and yet they crossed over into the promised land. So to look at it and go, God, whatever my part is, I'm going to walk through it graciously, and I'm going to walk through it trusting you, because what other option do I have? Trust myself or trust you. Amen.
Amen.
Awesome. All right, ladies, thank you for another great Tuesday night.
All right.
Thank you,
Jay.
Jay.
Love you guys.
Good night.
Good night.
good night.
Bye.
Night.